says. Jeremiah wrote this in Lamentations 3. He says this, "The Lord's loving kindness indeed never ceases. For him from his compassion never fail. They are what? New every morning. And then he says this. Let's read out loud together. Great is your faithfulness. You know, I wanted to share with you. Take a look up here this morning. Take a look up here for a second. No matter where you're at, no matter what you're struggling with, no matter how life difficult gets for you today, the Bible says that God is faithful. His mercies are new every morning. So forget about yesterday. What does God want to do in your life today? The Bible says that God is faithful. His mercies are new every morning. Colossians 1:17 says this, Jesus existed before everything else began. Now, isn't that great that Jesus existed before your bills? Isn't it great that Jesus existed before credit cards? Yeah, I'm thankful for that. The Bible says that Jesus existed before everything else began, and he holds all of creation together. The Bible says that the reason the world doesn't unravel is because Jesus is holding it together. And I just want to share with you this morning, if your world is starting to unravel, the Bible says you can trust Jesus to hold it together because he's faithful. You know, when I think about God's faithfulness, one of the things that comes to my mind is when I was 13 years old. How many of you can remember when you were 13 years old? Okay, some of you can, some of you can. I just turned 37 last year. Last week. See what happens when you get older? I just turned 37 last week. I already forgot. I forgot what I was going to say. No, when I was 13 years old, I had this opportunity to go to church, and you know, I just blew off my friend for kind of a while. I was like, no, I don't want to go to church. It's lame at church. But I went, and I just want to share with you that God showed up. And God showed me who he really was. And at the age of 13, I invited Jesus Christ into my life. You know, it's amazing to me how young you can be to do this. James Dobson, if you're familiar with him, focused on the family, he says at the age of 3 years old, he remembers asking Jesus Christ into his life. That's a pretty amazing thing to think about. I can't even remember what I was doing at 3. Can't remember last week. And yet God says, I will be faithful. No matter how old you are, no matter what you're struggling with, God is faithful. I want to make this real practical for you. So pull out your outline, and I want you to think about one area where God has been faithful to you. Now, you may not have been so faithful to him in that area, but one area that he's been faithful to you, I want you to write that down on your outline. Can you write that down? As you're doing that, I want you to listen to the words of Deuteronomy 7:9 that says this. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping his covenants of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. The Bible says if you follow God, if you make a decision to keep his commandments, God will remain faithful to you. And there are even times when we don't keep his commandments that God is still faithful to us. If you're going to get the most out of 40 days of community, I want you to remember everything that God has done in your life. And you may not be too excited about what's going on right now, but you can be excited that if you're a follower of Christ, you're going to go to heaven one day. You're going to be excited about that. I want you to notice this next point. Number 2, if you're going to get the most out of this, you and I have to learn to hold on to our future. We hold on to it. I said this. I hold on to my future. Well, what's my future, guys? What is your future? Well, the Bible says if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, that not only is he going to help you now, not only is he going to work in your life today, but you have the promise of eternity. Right? You have the promise of everlasting life. I want you to notice this in Exodus 19. He says this, now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, I want you to get something really quick. Notice how obedience is a part of following God. You can't follow God and be disobedient. You can't do a good job of it anyway. And so the Bible says, God says this, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Now I want you to remember, who is he talking to? Well, there's the 2 million people that were just in slavery 60 days earlier. Okay, I want you to get this. They had that slavery mindset. They wanted to go back to Egypt. They thought that they had it better off there. And God says this, if you just follow me, if you trust me, if you obey me, I'm going to make you my treasured possession. Not only that, you remember Pharaoh back there in Egypt, but you are going to become my priest, my kingdom of priests. Well, what does that mean? Well, the Bible says that God looks at us not as we look at ourselves. You know, sometimes when we look at ourselves, we don't like what we see. Isn't that true? You know, when we look at ourselves, we see ourselves for who we really are. And sometimes we look at ourselves and we think, you know, if I was just married, or, you know, if I would just look better, if I was just as good looking as the pastor, you know, every day. I'm glad you're looking. If I just was a little taller or a little lighter, you know, like that lighter. If we were just a little bit better looking, things would be great. And God says, no. When I look at you, when you give your life to me, I make you my treasured possession. And some of us have a hard time with that because we look at our lives and we see all the bad stuff and the stupid stuff that we've done. And yet God says, no. When you give your life to me, when you trust me, when you ask for forgiveness, you are my treasured possession. How many of you ever lost something pretty valuable? Anybody think that? Some of you have. I lost my wedding ring once. That's not fun. To do that, and then you have to admit that, because for a couple weeks I couldn't find my wedding ring. And I just want you to know I tore my house up looking for that. I looked under the bed, I looked in the kids' room, I could not find it. And one day I was looking in the garage and I was throwing trash away and there was this box there and I was like, man, I gotta go buy a ring. I was pulling this box apart, and I'm not lying to you, I was pulling this box apart and I ripped it like this, and it popped into my hand like this. I'm not even kidding. As I ripped the box, the thing just popped into my hand. And you know what? I was so excited.